So, imagine you're cleaning up a toxic chemical spill on your kitchen floor.
Okay, not a great start to the day, but I'm with you.
Right. So you grab a sponge, you wipe it all up, and the floor looks perfectly clean. But instead of safely washing out that sponge, you just walk out back, bury the highly toxic sponge in your yard, and go to the store to buy a brand new one.
And just sort of pretend the problem is permanently solved.
Exactly. You pretend it's solved. And, I mean, that absurdity is exactly how the world has handled our most dangerous water contaminants for decades. Well, until right now.
It's a staggering reality when you frame it that way. I mean, we're finally looking at a system that recognized the total insanity of that endless cycle.
Which is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're unpacking a really fascinating profile from the May 2026 issue of Awards Insider.
Yeah, centering on a company called Onterris. They're headquartered down in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we're looking specifically at their flagship technology, which is the Sorbix Repair system.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Onterris just won the 2026 E&E Leader Judges Choice Award in Business and Infrastructure.
Which is huge.
It is. In the environmental tech space, taking home the judge's choice, it isn't just a pat on the back for some incremental upgrade. It's a massive neon sign pointing to a fundamental paradigm shift.
Absolutely.
And to understand why this technology is turning the entire industry on its head, we really have to establish the core villain of the story first. We are talking about PFAS.
Right. PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, the notorious forever chemicals.
And they are everywhere right now.
They are. Honestly, for anyone tracking civic infrastructure or environmental policy, PFAS is, without a doubt, the single most daunting challenge on the board.
Because they just don't go away, right?
Exactly. The carbon-fluorine bond in these chemicals is one of the strongest in organic chemistry, meaning they simply do not break down in nature.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're currently contaminating drinking water, wastewater systems, industrial sites all over the globe.
And the regulations are getting way stricter now, too.
Oh, massively. Recent federal regulations are practically dropping the allowable limits to parts per trillion. So municipal water managers are facing these really intense legal and ethical mandates to just scrub these chemicals out of the water supply immediately.
But the twist here, and I think this is what makes the Onterris profile so compelling, is that removing PFAS from the water actually isn't the hardest part of the equation anymore.
No, it's really not.
Right. I think the general public just assumes, we don't have the technology to filter it out, but we totally do. We have highly effective physical filters.
Yeah, the real crisis actually kicks off the exact moment those filters start working successfully.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive.
It does, but the treatment options we've relied on for decades, they generate a massive secondary environmental crisis just by design.
So how does the standard approach actually work then? Like on a mechanical level?
Well, let's say a regional utility needs to pull PFAS out of the water. They typically rely on single-use filtration media. So picture massive tanks filled with granular activated carbon or specialized single-use ion exchange resins.
Okay, so just giant industrial-scale water filters.
Right. You pump millions of gallons of contaminated water through these vessels. The media traps the chemicals, and the clean water flows out to your tap.
So far, so good. The system works, the water you drink is safe.
Yes, but that brings us to the breaking point of the conventional model. Those giant tanks of carbon or resin, they are finite.
They act exactly like that kitchen sponge from the analogy.
Exactly like the sponge. Every 9 to 12 months, depending on the flow rate and contamination levels, millions of microscopic pores in that filtration media just fill up.
They reach absolute capacity.
Right. And at that exact moment, you no longer have a water filter. You possess tens of thousands of pounds of concentrated, highly hazardous waste, completely saturated with chemicals that refuse to degrade.
Which means the water facility has to actually shut down that entire treatment train, right?
Yep. They have to hire specialized crews to vacuum out literal tons of this toxic media.
And where does it even go? Because you can't just toss it in the local municipal dump.
No. Absolutely not. You either ship it halfway across the country to a sterilized hazardous waste landfill.
Which is essentially just putting the forever chemicals into a different hole in the ground.
Right, so they can just become someone else's problem in 50 years. Or, the other option, you send it to a high-temperature incinerator.
And from what I understand, incinerating PFAS is incredibly controversial.
Oh, highly controversial. Because if the temperature isn't perfectly maintained, you don't actually destroy the chemical, you just vaporize it and basically rain it back down on the surrounding neighborhoods.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
Both of those options are just an environmental liability nightmare.
They really are. And here's the kicker. Once a municipality pays exorbitant fees to dispose of that saturated media, they have to turn right around and purchase tens of thousands of pounds of brand new virgin media.
Which has its own massive manufacturing carbon footprint, I assume.
Huge footprint. They install it and start the countdown clock all over again.
It is the ultimate linear waste-generating model. It's buy, pollute, dispose, repeat.
Exactly.
And you, the listener, should care deeply about this. Because who do you think is paying for this insanely inefficient cycle?
Spoiler alert, it's you.
Right. It is your local tax dollars, it's your monthly water bills, absorbing the shock of buying new media and hauling away hazardous waste every single year.
Yeah, and for utilities already operating on razor-thin budgets, this isn't just an environmental headache. It is a financial black hole.
And yet, as the Awards Insider profile highlights, the industry just normalized this.
What's fascinating here is that for years, water managers just viewed this exorbitant, wasteful cycle as the inescapable cost of doing business.
Like it was just the only viable way to achieve compliance.
Right. And that normalization of a totally broken system is precisely what Onterris challenged. They looked at the accepted reality and basically refused to concede that this model needed to exist at all.
They decided it was time to figure out how to actually wash the sponge.
Yes.
Which brings us to the actual technological breakthrough that earned them the award, the Sorbius Repure system.
The world's first regenerable ion exchange system specifically designed for PFAS treatment.
Okay, we need to define some of these terms, though, so we don't lose anyone. Let's start with the ion exchange part.
Yeah.
How does this actually capture the chemicals differently than just running water through a basic carbon filter?
Sure. So think of granular activated carbon, like a microscopic maze. The water flows through, and the PFAS molecules physically get stuck in the dead ends of the maze.
Okay, makes sense.
Ion exchange, however, is a chemical process. The Repure system uses these specialized resin beads packed with harmless chloride ions. When a PFAS molecule in the water passes by the bead, the resin actively grabs the dangerous PFAS molecule and releases the harmless chloride molecule in its place.
Oh, I see. It's kind of like a molecular coat check. The water hands over its harmful PFAS coat, and the resin bead hands back a harmless chloride ticket, so the water can just keep flowing on its way.
That is a perfect analogy, and because it relies on that specific chemical swap, the resin can pull out target contaminants with incredible precision and speed.
Even down to those crazy stringent parts per trillion levels the EPA is mandating.
Even down to those levels, yes. But the true breakthrough isn't just capturing the chemical, it's the regenerable part of the Repure name.
Right, because eventually our molecular coat check gets completely full of coats.
Exactly.
In the Carl system, we'd literally just throw the entire building into a landfill. But Onterris figured out how to empty the coat check.
Right. Through a highly proprietary regeneration process, Onterris applies a specific chemical wash to the saturated resin.
Okay, what does that do?
This wash forces the resin beads to release all those trapped PFAS molecules, essentially stripping the media totally clean. The resin is then recharged with fresh chloride ions and is perfectly prepared to be deployed for another cycle of water treatment.
So the media can be reused over and over again.
Over and over.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here, because resolving one plot hole usually opens another one, right?
Fair enough. Go ahead.
If you chemically strip all that concentrated PFAS off the resin, haven't you just created a giant, highly toxic vat of liquid PFAS? Like, doesn't that just leave the municipality holding a bucket of concentrated poison instead of a solid brick of it?
That is the crucial question, and it all comes down to volume. By stripping the resin, the Repure system reduces the total volume of waste by over 99%.
Wait, 99%?
Yes. Imagine taking a massive 40,000-pound silo of contaminated solid waste that requires a fleet of specialized 18-wheelers just to haul away.
Right.
And reducing the actual hazardous element down to a few drums of concentrated liquid.
Oh, wow. So you isolate the actual chemical from the massive physical sponge that was holding it.
Exactly. And because you are now dealing with such a minuscule volume of concentrated waste, you open the door to actual permanent destruction technologies.
Like what?
Things like supercritical water oxidation or electrochemical degradation. These are emerging technologies that can truly break the carbon-fluorine bond and just annihilate PFAS.
But I'm guessing they're way too expensive to use normally.
Way too expensive to use on millions of gallons of lightly contaminated water or on massive solid blocks of resin. But applying them to a few gallons of highly concentrated liquid, suddenly total destruction becomes economically viable.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When I was reading the judges' notes from the E&E Leader Awards, they weren't just captivated by the chemistry.
Right, the infrastructure design.
Yeah, they were equally impressed by the physical infrastructure design itself. Onterris recognized that a small rural water district has entirely different needs than a massive metropolitan plant. So Ripuri isn't just one rigid behemoth of a machine. It's built for flexibility. It can be built as a massive, permanent installation or deployed as a fast-response mobile unit.
And those mobile units are a critical lifeline. Contamination events are frequently discovered suddenly,
Right, like an emergency.
Exactly. Maybe a nearby military base or an industrial plant had a leak, and suddenly the local drinking water is just spiking with forever chemicals.
And a municipality can't just wait 3 years to design, permit, and build a permanent facility to fix that.
No, people need safe water today. So Onterris can roll a mobile Ripuri unit onto the site and begin stripping PFAS from the water supply almost immediately.
Which secures public health in the short term while providing a clear operational bridge to eventually constructing permanent infrastructure.
Exactly. It's an incredibly robust technological solution.
It is, but, and you know this is coming, because I cannot look at civic infrastructure without questioning the economics. I see a glaring logistical hurdle here.
All right, let's hear the pushback.
A self-cleaning circular system that isolates waste sounds like an absolute dream for the environment. But if every small town in the country suddenly has to build their own highly advanced multi-million-dollar chemical regeneration plant right next to their water facility just to clean these resins,
Right.
wouldn't that bankrupt them instantly? Most towns just don't have the capital expenditure budget for that.
They absolutely do not.
Right. And they don't have specialized chemical engineers on municipal payroll to safely run a toxic stripping operation.
So how is this actually viable for a local utility facing flat or even shrinking budgets?
That underlying skepticism is exactly what the award's insider profile addresses.
Yeah.
And honestly, it is the primary reason Onterris won the judge's choice.
Because they solved it.
Because a technological breakthrough that no one can afford is practically useless, right? Onterris realized that if you force every municipality to build and operate complex regeneration facilities, the barrier to entry is insurmountable.
The technology would just fail in the open market. Exactly. So they solved the business problem right alongside the chemical problem. The regeneration process does not happen on site at the local water plant.
Okay, wait, so the local water manager isn't the one cleaning the resin?
Not at all. Onterris handles the entire regeneration process off-site at centralized, highly specialized facilities. They operate this under a patented hub-and-spoke model.
A hub-and-spoke model. Okay, walk me through the logistics of that. Let's say I'm managing a local water facility for a mid-sized town. I've got the Ripuri system installed. What does my day-to-day actually look like?
Okay, in this model, your municipal facility is one of the spokes.
Yeah.
You have the Ripuri vessels installed, quietly and efficiently pulling PFAS out of your town's drinking water.
Got it.
After several months, when the resin in your specific vessels reaches its capacity, you don't throw it away. But you also don't clean it yourself.
So what happens?
Instead, Onterris technicians arrive, swap out your saturated resin with freshly clean, fully recharged resin, and take your spent media back to their centralized hub.
Wait, I have to challenge this. You're telling me that putting heavy diesel 18-wheelers on the highway to haul thousands of pounds of wet resin back and forth across the region is somehow better for the environment and cheaper than the old system?
It is vastly better, and the life cycle analysis proves it.
Really?
Yes. Remember the alternative? In the old linear model, trucks were already hauling saturated media away destined for a landfill or an incinerator.
True, that was already happening.
And then separate trucks were hauling brand new virgin media, which requires heavy petrochemical manufacturing processes to create all the way to your facility.
Oh, I see.
By simply transporting the resin to a regional hub, cleaning it and returning it, you entirely eliminate the massive carbon footprint associated with manufacturing brand new resin every single year. The transportation emissions are just a fraction of those manufacturing emissions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense when you compare it to the heavy industrial footprint of creating virgin plastics and resins from scratch.
Exactly.
And financially, I assume the genius here is shared economics.
Precisely. Multiple municipalities, regional utilities, and even industrial users in a given region are all operating as spokes. They're all sending their spent resin to the exact same shared Onterris hub.
Oh, so by pooling their resources, they effectively split the massive infrastructure costs of the regeneration plant.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the exact business elegance the E&E leader judges were raving about.
So no single customer has to shoulder the capital expenditure of building the complex chemical stripping facility.
Right.
They don't have to hire the engineers to run it or manage the intensive safety protocols of isolating the concentrated waste. They just subscribe to the service.
Exactly. They take the most expensive, complicated part of advanced water treatment and turn it into a shared operational expense.
That is brilliant. By layering a shared economy business model on top of a major technical breakthrough, Onterris actively lowered the barrier to entry.
They democratized access to clean water technology. Smaller municipalities that would normally be totally priced out of top-tier environmental remediation can suddenly afford the absolute best system in the world.
Because they're only paying for their slice of the regeneration hub's time, rather than buying the whole pie.
Exactly.
But of course, with any major paradigm shift, especially when it involves something as critical as civic drinking water, a great idea on paper is entirely meaningless if it fails in execution.
Oh, totally.
We need to look at the cold, hard data. Is this actually working out there in the real world at scale?
The short answer is an emphatic yes. The Awards Insider profile makes a real point to emphasize that Sorbix Repure is absolutely not a pilot project.
It's not just a prototype.
No, it isn't some theoretical model working perfectly in a pristine laboratory beaker while struggling out in the field. These systems are currently operating at some of the absolute largest PFAS treatment installations on the planet.
Let me throw some of the hard numbers from the profile at you, just to put the sheer scale of this into perspective. Across their 3 largest deployments right now, Onterris is treating more than 30,000 gallons per minute.
Let that number sink in for a second. 30,000 gallons. Every single minute of every single day.
To visualize that, an Olympic-sized swimming pool holds roughly 660,000 gallons of water. The Repure system is treating an entire Olympic swimming pool's worth of water every 22 minutes.
Wow.
Completely stripping it of forever chemicals, non-stop. Annually, these systems are treating billions of gallons of water across municipal, industrial, and specialized remediation applications.
And we really have to look at what that massive scale means for the environmental footprint, too. Remember that closed-loop design?
Yeah.
The data confirms that the Repure system delivers a greater than 99% reduction in PFAS waste compared to conventional single-use systems.
Over 99% of the hazardous waste that used to be buried in the ground is just eliminated from the life cycle.
The volume drops to almost nothing.
And the economics back up the hub-and-spoke model, too. The profile notes that customers sharing the regeneration infrastructure are seeing more than a 50% reduction in their operational and environmental footprint costs.
A 50% reduction in operational costs. I mean, for a municipal utility manager who is currently trapped between tightening federal EPA regulations on one side and completely flat civic budgets on the other,
Right.
cutting operational costs in half while actively improving your environmental impact isn't just an improvement, it is a lifeline.
What really stood out to me as the ultimate proof point is the independent validation of all these numbers.
Yes, that's so important.
Because we've all seen environmental tech companies make wild pie-in-the-sky claims in their marketing brochures that just completely fall apart under scrutiny.
Happens all the time.
Right. But the greater than 99% waste reduction delivered by Repure has been rigorously validated by independent research. In fact, the underlying work and research behind the system earned the Australian Water Association's Paper of the Year.
Which is a remarkably meaningful signal in the scientific community.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Australia has some of the most aggressive water scarcity and contamination research in the world. Earning their top research accolade proves that this technology has global applicability and has withstood severe peer review.
That's huge.
The award judges specifically highlighted this, actually. In a highly competitive field where everyone claims to have a silver bullet, having results backed by published, independent research gives a level of verified confidence that you simply cannot manufacture. The results are operational.
So what does this all mean for us? When you step back and look at the whole picture, it becomes incredibly obvious why Onterris took home the Judge's Choice Award.
Yeah, without a doubt.
The vast majority of environmental technology entries, even the really impressive ones, are fundamentally just improving on existing approaches.
Yeah.
They take the current linear system and make the filter media slightly more efficient or maybe slightly cheaper to manufacture.
But Onterris did something fundamental. They questioned the underlying premise itself.
Exactly.
They looked at a decades-old dispose and replace default, a totally wasteful system that an entire global industry had blindly accepted as normal, and they completely dismantled it. They rebuilt water treatment from the ground up as a closed-loop, circular design.
They didn't just optimize the toxic sponge. They invented a way to clean it and then built an ingenious shared economy business model so that every town, big or small, could actually afford to use it.
And that leads to a much broader takeaway here, one that extends far beyond PFAS and water filtration.
What's that?
Well, if we can successfully redesign an entrenched, deeply wasteful system like municipal water treatment into a shared circular economy, what other massive costs of doing business in our civic infrastructure are just waiting for a similar paradigm shift?
That is a great question.
I'd really encourage you to look around your own city's infrastructure this week. Whether it's energy grids, waste management, or transit, how much of what we accept as normal is really just moving expensive waste from one pile to another simply because no one has demanded a better way?
That is a brilliant and provocative point to end on. Because at the end of the day, this deep dive isn't just about abstract chemical engineering or business models. It is your drinking water flowing out of your tap. It is your local tax dollars funding these facilities. And it is your environment being fundamentally protected by companies willing to break a toxic cycle.
Well said.
If you have questions about being a part of future segments or other partnership opportunities, reach out to a member of our team today. Links are located in the body of this session's description.